from the wrath of the Northmen, O Lord, deliver us. Laden yourselves with sealskins and keep your weapons sharp, for we are going a Viking on this week's Tabletop Tuesday. Hey there everyone, thanks for joining us here on another Tabletop Tuesday as we discuss one of my favorite books in the original Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition line, the Vikings Campaign Sourcebook. Published back in 91 by then TSR Inc., the Vikings Campaign Sourcebook is a 96-page softcover designed by David Zeb Cook with illustrations by Ned Dameron. Old schoolers and new schoolers alike might recognize Zeb from his 15 years at TSR, or more simply from the numerous RPGs, modules, board games, card games, rulebooks, and party mystery games he's created over his long career. Ned Dameron you might recognize from his covers for Stephen King's The Dark Tower series or his numerous other works for D&D. But anyway, diving into it, Chapter 1 provides us a brief overview of what this book is and is not, along with what, historically, Viking society was and was not. This includes addressing popular misconceptions at the time, such as the winged helm and so on. Further, the book lays out that it is in fact one part historical reference, but that it's also a reference for Viking mythology and myth, providing a pathway for true fantasy campaigns set in the far north. Chapter 2 is an excellent overlay of Viking history, as understood at the time of writing. It begins with the Danish raid on Lindisfarne in 793 and runs until the perceived collapse of Viking society around 1096 or so. It further provides an excellent reading list if someone wants to really dive into the literature side of things. Chapter 3 covers the nuances of character creation in a Viking-themed world, and it is fantastic. While the racial selections are extremely limited, there's two, being only the, human and the sweet trollborn, characters are given gifts to help them along in their epic adventures. Only humans, sorry. Gifts are boons bestowed by fate, called the Norns, and range from, bad luck or a blood feud or to things like, inheritance or a rune lore or a title, all of which add wonderful options and draw players right into the feel of an ancient Viking world. Trollborn, as mentioned previously, are sweet. They are big, they're ugly, they're foul-tempered, and but they're rumored to have troll blood running through their veins, hence they're called Trollborn. These aren't necessarily, crossbreeds or whatever. It may just be, a bloodline that's existed throughout the years, but I digress. But these aren't the trolls of World of Warcraft or other fantasy settings. These are Viking trolls. The chapter also presents classes that fit the theme, like fighter and ranger and thief and bard, which, we call a skald, and specialist mages, while detailing some others that don't fit as much. Now, take this with a grain of salt because an imaginative player could absolutely make the argument a priest or a druid belongs in the campaign. So don't just take the suggestions slavishly. Work with your players, decide what's appropriate for your campaign. But each class gets a treatment adapting it to the campaign, such as warrior followers being something more akin to the North, like, you got your Trollborn and you got your rune casters and so on. But most excitingly, we get the unique classes of the North. There are berserkers, a personal favorite, and they cover the fearsome warriors who harness and cultivate their battle madness. We get rune casters, rare and fearsome warriors whose power springs from their understanding of the runes gifted to the mortal races by Odin, or whoever in your campaign world presented the runes. It's whatever. Finally, we cover an exhaustive bit of context and flavor with the remaining pages. Women warriors are covered, along with some information on age, homeland, social class, proficiencies, languages, and an impressive 2-page list of Viking names I have certainly found invaluable over the years. Chapter 4 dives into rune magic, the unique system built into the campaign setting. On the one hand, you have the normal magic of 2E. You have wizards and so on and so forth, just, with a little bit of a flavor. On the other side, you have the ancient form of writing used to invoke charms and contracts and boundary markers and memorial stones. And within this ancient form of writing, some runes were special and could be used to create potent magical effects. As far as alternate magic systems, it's one of my favorites and a fascinating one. Chapter 5 covers monsters you might find in a Viking setting, from the mundane things like wildlife and so on, to the existing entries with the names they might be known by in the Viking lands. For example, your party wouldn't encounter a zombie, they would encounter a genganger. Or rather than a werewolf, it would be a hamlipa. Additional information is given in each entry to further round out the immersive flavor of the campaign, though there's rarely any instance of actual stats being different. These are flavor type things, and there are entirely new entries as well. Dwarves and elves, very different from their standard fantasy counterparts, are covered here, along with Jotuns and trolls, of course. Chapter 6 talks about equipment and treasure, something very important in a Viking campaign. While the types of currency and exchange in the Viking world were complex, this chapter narrows it down to three main methods. You got debts of honor, you got barter, and you got cash. While barter and cash are immediately recognizable, the debt of honor might not be, but it's fairly simple in execution. I do something for you, and then someday you do something for me. The specifics of what and when and how are fluid, and mainly up to the persons involved. Like, I'll come along with you on this raid if in exchange you help me construct my beer hall later on, provided we survive and get back. Stuff like that. The chapter presents an equipment list with commensurate cost, but most are listed as not available. This is another area GMs are going to want to tailor things to their own individual campaign. The chapter wraps up discussing appropriate magic items along with the importance of naming your sword. Chapter 7 deep dives into Viking culture with a fine example story about a fellow named Ivar and his deeds during a year. No, this isn't Ivar the Boneless. That's another guy. It covers social rankings, belief systems, more on the status of women, some excellent blueprints of Viking lodgings, aspects of daily life like farms and food and trade and so on. Law and religion are also touched on towards the end. Finally, Chapter 8 presents a brief gazetteer of the Viking world and lands along with a beautiful longship illustration in the back. If you have the full version of the book, there's a big old map in the back detailing the Viking world with trade routes and what was being traded on these routes and so on. It's just absolutely awesome detail here. I haven't seen craft like this in D&D in a while. Outside Ed Greenwood's work, that is. Reception to the book, it's hard to determine. There was a review of the book back in May of 92 in Dragon Magazine 181. In it, Rick Swan really dives into a plethora of nitpicky criticisms I can't say I agree with, along with making several arguments that seem to come out of left field and have nothing to do with the book. For example, he criticizes the book for failing to be a new role-playing experience it aspires to be. And I have no clue what the heck the dude was talking about here. It's a source book on Viking campaigns. That's all it presents itself as. And so I have no idea where he got this new role-playing experience nonsense and can only conclude dude must have been having a bad day or confusing the book with some other criticism he had brewing for something. I don't know. However, in perusing buyer and seller reviews, everyone seems to really like the book and give it its proper due, so that's good. Personally, I felt the book excelled at presenting the best possible resource at the time for Viking information. As an amateur Viking buff myself, I dug this book. I thought it was excellent. Sadly, the book is pretty darn pricey to acquire these days, as seems to be happening with a lot of 2E material, so you may want to snatch some stuff up now rather than see the prices continue to rise later. It's not available at all on Amazon that I saw, and eBay copies are going from $50 or more, so be warned. However, that being said, I have it on good authority it's out there to be found if someone were to say, sail the high seas. but I digress. In conclusion, this is a wonderful resource to enhance any existing campaign that might want to delve into Viking culture or a campaign that might want to be set in Viking culture. In my opinion, it delivered what it set out to do expertly and is absolutely worth having a copy of in your collection if you have any interest in going a Viking. And that's all we got for today, folks. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you giving me a moment of your time. I do hope I entertained y'all with yet another little gem from the past and hope to see y'all again in the next week. Until then, roll some dice of your own, bust out a good game, gather around the table and make some memories. And while you're at it, put in a good movie, watch a cartoon, read a comic book, and as always, have a good one.